Did you know that laws still exist around the world today that exonerate alleged and convicted rapists if they marry their victims? So-called Marry-Your-Rapist laws were back in the news recently after Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas repealed that state's version of the legislation. It was a huge step forward and came not long after a wave of other countries in the region did the same. But there are still countries around the world with different variations of these laws. And though the majority exist in the Middle East and Africa, the West isn't exempt. In fact, the legislation largely draws its roots to a 19th century French code. So, what countries still have these archaic laws? I'm Alex, and on this episode of Now This World, we're looking into these laws, how they came to be, how they're still hurting women, and whether the problem stops with repealing them. Though variations of Marry-Your-Rapist laws have mostly died out in the West, Human Rights Watch researcher Ratna Begum says they largely originated from the French Napoleonic Code of 1810, which stated that if the kidnapper, quote, married the girl whom he has stolen, the family could waive his criminal prosecution. Many provisions also require the couple to stay together for a certain amount of time if the alleged rapist wants to avoid punishment. A similar article was adopted into the Ottoman Code of 1911, and many countries around the world enacted similar laws after Western colonial powers introduced them.
It was then applied to a lot of French mandates in countries where France colonized them, particularly in North Africa, Lebanon, several countries in the Middle East. And so when the British colonized several countries in the Middle East as well, they did not apply the British code in those circumstances. They applied the Ottoman code, or allowed the Ottoman code to apply for the Muslims. Some of them retained these colonial provisions.
France only repealed theirs in 1994, and other Western countries like Denmark and Italy eventually did too. A rush of countries in the Middle East and North Africa have also rolled back their own provisions in the last couple of years. But, according to Begum, patriarchal attitudes have kept versions of the laws in place for years around the world. She says some lawmakers felt like they were protecting survivors.
The idea behind a lot of these marriages or these terrible crimes is interrelated between the concept of women and girls as being property. It is about the virginity of the woman and girl being damaged goods.
Protests have cropped up in countries around the world, from Turkey to Lebanon to Morocco, where in 2012, 16-year-old Amina Filali committed suicide after being forced to marry her rapist, who continued to sexually abuse her after their marriage.
أنا مجرم حسنا ناخذوا حقنا، مجرم ما يقدرش يبقى مطلق، كل ما درنا احنا يقدر يدينا لوحدة أخرى، بأن خصو يتشبر.
Amina's case made headlines across the world, but it's just one modern example of many, where these laws and provisions double down on trauma for women, while essentially giving their abusers a get-out-of-jail-free card. If you're wondering how often this actually happens, it's not that uncommon. The head of a women's shelter in the West Bank documented 60 cases in that shelter alone, from 2011 to 2017, wherein a rape prosecution was stopped after the alleged rapist married the victim. And though these laws may be antiquated, they aren't just a thing of the past. Experts we spoke to at the World Bank, women's rights NGO Equality Now, and Human Rights Watch indicated that it's hard to compile a truly complete list of countries with these provisions in place, because of the varying research methodologies. Language in the individual laws can also be contradictory, not well codified, or confusingly worded. So there were some disparities in the countries these organizations listed with Marry-Your-Rapist laws in place today. For example, according to the World Bank, the Philippines, Bahrain, Iraq, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Libya, and Syria have legal provisions stipulating that the perpetrator of rape or sexual assault can escape punishment by marrying the victim, and some orgs would add countries to that list. The difficulty of tracking these laws speaks to the root of the issue itself, a lack of accountability, awareness, and discussion. There are also variations of these laws that exist in other parts of the world. For example, in Greece, Russia, Serbia, and Thailand, an alleged rapist can avoid prosecution if the victim is underage. And in Singapore, Romania, Thailand, and Turkey, if the victim forgives him. There are also another dozen or so countries where accused rapists can be exonerated for reaching settlements with the victims' families, and at least another 10 where intermarital rape is totally legal. Already around the world, 1 in 3 women have suffered sexual or physical violence, and 1 in 10 girls have been raped or sexually assaulted. These laws make it easier for them to get stuck in cycles of violence, often at a very young age.
قانون هذايا قانون حتى إنسان ما يرضاه على روحه. طفل عمرها 13 سنة معناتها يزيش تم اغتصابها وبمارس عليها أبشع حاجة تنجم تمارس عليها، ويزيش القانون بكل معناتها محبة أعطى المغتصب حق لكمل يغتصبها مدى الحياة.
These demonstrations have actually resulted in some legislative momentum, and Begum says local women's rights groups are leading the charge against Marry-Your-Rapist laws in various countries. Provocative campaigns like this by Lebanese women's group Abad, coupled with petitions from other women's rights groups, resulted in the repealing of the country's own legal loophole. But to help address violence against women down the line, does more than the law need to change? Although it can be cause for celebration when countries repeal these laws, it may not mean they're making significant progress in halting gender-based violence. So long as these patriarchal attitudes are reinforced, the practice may continue.
The practice of forced marriage to rapists actually exists beyond the law. So there are situations where families are doing this without actually involving the authorities at all.
And in places like Lebanon, for example, even after the Marry-Your-Rapist loophole was closed, activists pointed out that no law exists criminalizing child marriage or marital rape. Whereas in Tunisia, repealing their law came as part of a larger effort to eliminate violence against women and girls, including new measures to support survivors with psychological and legal assistance. Begum thinks changes within the education system may be the key.
You have to get to the root of what's going on in society. One is to really have sex education. Secondly, that no woman or girl should be identified simply as a sexual object. And thirdly, we also need to combat that level of stigma on sexual violence victims.
Still, a repeal is one step in the right direction. In order to repeal these laws, there should be public awareness and discussion about them. So what do you think it will take to effectively destigmatize this issue? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching Now This World, and if you learned something from our deep dives into global issues like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe.